Yeah, it's working.
Just try that.
It's working, Chair.
Yeah, it's back working.
Okay. I just wanted to say that the Reverend Andy Murphy, who is my chaplain for this year, is not here today. And I know he would say how important this decision will be for us. And on that note, I would like to remind councillors that we want a good debate. We want a good debate. We want everything on the table to be spoken about with regard to the local plan. I'm sure it will be. And that we want a civil debate. You know, we're not enemies. We're looking tonight to take a step nearer to the new local plan. That's what it's all about at the moment. So let's try and be as civil and nice to each other as we can. That would be good. Now, I have to record the first item 1 on the agenda, is to record any apologies. And I believe we have one, Councillor Michael Rickman. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to remind members, please make sure you sign the attendance sheet. We do this before the meeting starts. If you arrive after the meeting starts, you will need to note your actual time of the attendance, so this can be recorded by Democratic Services. You cannot vote on any business for which consideration started before your arrival, but sadly for Councillor Rickman not here, but everyone else is here, so they know that. If you are leaving, though, before the meeting ends, you will also need to sign out, please, and to record your time of departure on the attendance sheet. It's very important for us to do that. I can move to item 2 now, I think, which is the declarations of members' interest. So, do we have any members who wish to declare an interest tonight? Councillor Peter Scott first, I think.
Thank you very much. Chair, I appreciate I've publicly expressed strong views on the local plan, and I may similarly do so tonight. However, I have consistently listened to the debate, and will also do tonight, and I'll do that before I ultimately decide on how to vote.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Scott. Thank you. And we have Councillor David Page, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, a declaration. I'm also County Councillor for Market Harborough, Western Foxton. And I'd also like to make a statement too, if I may, with your permission. Members will be aware that I have previously expressed my strong views on the local plan, and I intend to do so again tonight, probably. However, I have consistently listened to debates around this and stepped back from an earlier position to re-examine the evidence and reassess my thinking from scratch. I've spoken to Logan residents, attended meetings of the Planning Advisory Committee, Cabinet, and a number of other meetings, including the council briefing last Thursday. I've asked questions of the Director of Planning and his office and officers of Leicestershire County Council. So I have repeatedly read the documents. So I have made a serious and genuine effort to consider the issues fully, rationally and in the round. Therefore, I come here tonight to listen carefully to the debate before reaching my final judgment.
Thank you, Councillor Page, for that statement. Thank you very much. And I think we have Councillor King. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chairman, just to declare that obviously I'm a member of the County Council for the Gartree Division. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Mrs Page.
No statement, just declaring County Councillor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mrs Page. And we have Councillor Galton. Sorry.
I'm also a member of the County Council, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. And I think that's it. I think we clear that one now. Thank you. And we now move to item 3, the main business of the meeting tonight. Now, I recognise that this is a sensitive and emotive issue. What we need to do, though, is we've got a lot of time ahead, so we've got to devote to this now. And it is sensitive, it's emotive, but we need to ensure that the meeting runs smoothly. So I would really ask that we all be respectful to each other and that there are no interruptions during the debate. We'll try and manage the debate very well, but I just wanted to make that point. It's the most efficient way of doing it and allowing everyone to say what they want to say with regard to this new local plan. So we now come to item 3, which is the main agenda, and that's the submission of the Harbour District Local Plan. Now, we have 10 members, lots of members of the public here. We have 10 members who wish to speak on this item, and we're going to start the process with that. Each person, just to remind you all, has 3 minutes. My timekeeper here on my right-hand side will give me a kick when we'll give a bit of notice.
Give a 30
We'll give 30-second notice, right? That will help. So that's what we will do. We do need to keep to strict timings because if the speakers just listen out for the early warning and when the 3 minutes is up. Okay? So we're going to start that now. Now, according to my documentation, the first speaker is Mr. David Campbell Kelly. Would you please come to the microphone? You're there already, very close. Thank you. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Is that clear enough? Thank you.
Very clear. Yeah, very clear, David. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. David Campbell Kelly, resident of Willoughby Waterleys, Chair of the Willoughby Waterleys Residents Association. Throughout preparation of this local plan, members have repeatedly been told that the Council should move quickly to examination in order to benefit from the lower housing target contained in the 2023 NPPF. Councillors have been told that by submitting the plan quickly, the district could reduce the number of homes required over the plan period by up to 4,000 dwellings. That claim has been presented as one of the principal reasons why the plan was issued for Regulation 19 consultation last year and why it must now be submitted for examination urgently. Local plans should look forward at least 15 years from adoption. By the time this plan is adopted, it will already have fewer than 15 years life remaining. That means preparation of the next local plan review will need to begin relatively soon. When that begins, it will not be based on the housing target used in this draft plan. It will be based on the revised targets introduced through the 2024 NPPF, which increases the housing requirement for Harborough by around 200 houses per annum. When the increased target is used to calculate need in that plan review, the apparent reduction of 3,000 to 4,000 homes will disappear. In reality, accelerating submission of this plan before it is properly ready will only reduce the overall housing provided by at most a few hundred homes spread over the next 15 years, rather than several thousand. That modest figure could potentially be offset simply by improving delivery on existing approved strategic sites. For example, Lutterworth East, still not anticipated to deliver until 2032. If that's simply delivered earlier, it would compensate for the minor loss in supply, which results from delaying the plan submission. The question is whether the perceived benefit of rushing this plan forward is actually as advantageous as has been suggested. If the benefit is only a few hundred homes are saved over 15 years, rather than several thousand, members may reasonably wish to consider whether that advantage justifies submitting an unready plan which relies heavily on large strategic sites whose viability and deliverability clearly remain uncertain.
30 seconds.
That is a judgment you need to make tonight. If you submit, the risk is the Planning Inspectorate finds the plan not sound and that further delays clarity in the district. There is no great advantage to rushing to examination before the plan is ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell Kelly. Thank you so much. And now we call upon the second speaker, and that's Dr. Whitehouse. Please, Dr. Anne Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Yeah.
Tonight's decision has been described as procedural. It is not. You are not voting tonight on adopting this plan. You are deciding whether the plan in its current form is ready to be submitted for independent examination. That distinction is important because in the planning system, submission carries a clear meaning. It means the council believes the plan is sound. Under the NPPF, a local plan must pass 4 tests of soundness. It must be positively prepared, justified, effective, and consistent with national policy. These are not political tests. These are statutory tests applied by the Planning Inspectorate. If a plan fails these tests, the inspector cannot recommend its adoption. You may hear the argument that submission must happen now to protect the district from speculative development. But across England, some local plans have failed examination, have required major modification, or been withdrawn altogether, leaving those councils with more uncertainty, not less. So the decision before you tonight is not whether Harbour should adopt this plan. The question is whether the strategy before you is sufficiently robust to move into examination. On March the 2nd, residents raised a number of issues directly related to those soundness tests, namely infrastructure delivery, transport capacity, flood risk, financial viability, and the risk of concentrating a large proportion of the district's housing supply into a single strategic site. Most of those issues remain unresolved. This matters because once the plan is submitted, the inspector cannot design a new strategy. They can only examine the strategy the council submitted. So if a plan returns repeatedly with fundamental unresolved issues at its core, those same questions will continue to arise at examination again and again. National planning policy does not require councils to submit plans that are not yet ready. National policy requires that the tests of soundness are met. Submission therefore represents a very clear statement that the council believes the evidence base is robust, that infrastructure delivery is credible,
30 seconds.
that the spatial strategy is justified. Councillors are elected to exercise judgment on behalf of the district, so tonight's vote is not about speed. Speed is not the statutory test, soundness is. The question before you, therefore, is simple. Is the plan, as it stands today, ready to be defended as sound? The responsibility for this judgment rests with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Whitehouse. Thank you for that. And now we have the next speaker is Mr. Mason. Do we have Mr. Mason? Yes, we do. Thank you.
Chair, councillors, I would like to focus on the spatial strategy of the local plan. In other words, where growth is being directed and why. The proposed strategic development area south of Gartree Road is very large, around 4,000 homes. Over time, that could mean roughly 10 to 20,000 additional residents. At that scale, this is not simply an extension to an existing settlement. It is effectively the creation of a new settlement within a narrow corridor between Oadby, Stretton Hall and Great Glen. Today, those communities remain clearly separate. The countryside between them maintains the identity of each settlement. That separation is not accidental. It reflects the historic development pattern of this part of the district and is recognised in the council's own evidence base. Studies prepared for the local plan acknowledge the importance of avoiding coalescence between existing settlements in this area. You may hear that master plans will include landscaped buffers or green space intended to maintain separation between the new development and the surrounding villages. Those intentions may well be genuine, but councillors tonight are not approving a detailed master plan. You are allocating strategic land for development that will evolve over decades. And experience across the planning system shows that buffers and separation can reduce over time as development pressures change or housing numbers need to be maintained. Once land of this scale is allocated, the underlying spatial decision has already been made. There is also a wider strategic issue. The spatial strategy that originally shaped development patterns across Leicester and Leicestershire was linked to the strategic growth plan. That strategy assumed major transport investment, including a strategic expressway around the south and east of Leicester to support a growth corridor. However, that strategic transport plan is no longer being taken forward. Yet the spatial pattern of development has not fundamentally changed, and large-scale growth is still being directed to locations originally justified by that transport framework. The result is that very significant development is now proposed in areas that remain heavily dependent on the existing road network.
30 seconds.
There is also a further planning principle to consider. Justification under the National PPF requires not only evidence supporting the chosen strategy, but also that reasonable alternatives have been properly considered and shown to be less suitable. That means demonstrating why concentrating such a large share of the district's housing in one strategic location is preferable to more dispersed patterns of growth using smaller and potentially more deliverable sites across the region. Council has therefore faced an important planning question. If the strategic transport development that once supported this pattern is no longer being delivered, and if alternative patterns exist, is concentrating development of this scale and this location still the most justified spatial strategy for the district? And that is the question the Inspector will ultimately examine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mason. Thank you. Time that well. Okay, the next speaker I'm going to call upon Miss Jackie Klaus, please.
Chair, councillors, I would like to speak about infrastructure and deliverability. A local plan must demonstrate that the infrastructure needed to support development can realistically be delivered. A local plan, the NPPF requires local plans to be effective, working with organisations responsible for infrastructure. In this case, one of the most important partners is Leicestershire County Council, which is responsible for highways, education and much of the infrastructure required to support this development. The local transport authority is not simply another stakeholder. It is the statutory authority responsible for the highway network on which this strategy depends. Because the County Council's role here is not advisory but statutory, its position ultimately depends upon whether the infrastructure evidence demonstrates deliverability, not on the timetable for submission. Its formal response to the Reg 19, the County Council, acting as the local transport authority, concluded that the plan in its current form fails the NPPF test soundness in terms of effectiveness and consistency with national policy. It also noted that key parts of the Edison base are not yet sufficiently mature, raising questions whether the plan can realistically be delivered. Councillors may hear the discussions with the County Council are continuing and that these issues can be resolved with submission. But the infrastructure position is not yet settled. At the Cabinet meeting on the 2nd of March, councillors heard that County Council continues to seek significant infrastructure provision linked to this development strategy. There is also the question of funding. Infrastructure of this scale normally relies on Section 106 contributions and in many areas a community infrastructure levy. Harborough does not yet have adopted SIL, and SIL does not apply to affordable housing. That means much of the infrastructure funding would rely on Section 106 contributions negated with the developer.
30 seconds.
Yet the County Council has warned that the plan lacks a coherent approach to securing the developer contributions needed to address community transport impacts, creating a significant risk to the plan's effective delivery. Harbour District Council allocates the development, but the County Council is responsible for delivering much of the infrastructure needed to support it. If the plan submitted now, Harbour commits to this development strategy
you. We have 3 minutes.
While negotiations with the County Council about infrastructure and
3 minutes, please.
Councillors therefore face a straightforward question tonight. If the infrastructure framework is sufficiently clear to demonstrate that this strategy is deliverable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Klaus. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, can I call upon the 5th speaker, please, Ms. Sue Bell. A reminder there that it's 3 minutes, please, from the moment you speak.
Chair, councillors, thank you for allowing me to speak. I would like to talk about flooding and environmental safety. For many residents, this is not a theoretical concern. It is something people have experienced directly. Great Glen suffered severe flooding in January 2025 when the River Sence reached its highest recorded level at the Great Glen monitoring station, affecting roads and properties in the village. Flood alerts continue to be issued for the River Sence catchment during periods of heavy rainfall. The wider landscape around Oadby and Great Glen forms part of this drainage system. Water flows through farmland, tributaries and brooks, including the River Sence and smaller watercourses such as the Washbrook, before moving through surrounding communities. The land south of Gartree Road sits within this wider catchment. When large areas of open land are replaced with housing, roads and other hard surfaces, the way water moves through the landscape inevitably changes. Surface water runs off more quickly and must be carefully managed through drainage systems. Developers often explain that modern drainage systems can reduce surface runoff compared with existing farmland. However, flood risk across a catchment is not determined by runoff rates alone. It also depends on how water moves through the wider landscape, how drainage systems are maintained over time, and how multiple developments affect the same catchment. National planning is very clear on the principle involved. The National Planning Policy Framework requires a sequential approach to flood risk, meaning development should be directed to areas with the lowest risk of flooding wherever possible. Development must also be safe for its lifetime and must not increase flood risk elsewhere. For a development of this scale, that means drainage systems that will function reliably for decades. Residents therefore want to understand whether the full implications have been examined before the local plan depends on this site for housing delivery. Flood modelling, drainage design and long-term maintenance arrangements must all work properly. Flood risk is therefore not only an environmental issue. It is also closely linked to infrastructure delivery and long-term sustainability. Planning inspectors examine these issues carefully when deciding whether a local plan is sound. Councillors therefore face an important question tonight.
30 seconds.
Does the current evidence provide sufficient confidence that development at this scale can be delivered without increasing flood risk to surrounding communities? Because once land is built on and drainage patterns change, the consequences are long-term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bell. Thank you so much. And the next speaker is Ms. Sunita Agarwal. Apologies if I haven't got that completely right. Thank you. You also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
One here because I'm shorter than everybody else.
Should bring the mic down a little bit.
Okay.
That's
Is that
it.
okay now?
That's better. Thank you very much.
Chair and councillors, I would like to focus on financial viability. Because planning policy ultimately has to work in financial reality. The proposed strategic development area south of Gartree Road has been described in the council's own viability evidence as marginal in viability terms. This means the financial balance of the development is already tight before some important costs are fully known. For a development of thousands of homes, the site would need to support a wide range of obligations: transport improvements, flood management and drainage, schools and community infrastructure, affordable housing, public services and facilities. All of these are important, but all of them have a cost. Councils have also heard that the local plan expects this development to help deliver new schools for the area. Schools are essential infrastructure, but they also represent a significant financial commitment within the overall development package. Sometimes it is suggested that large strategic sites may attract additional government or Homes England funding. However, for the purpose of a local plan examination, what matters is the evidence available today. Planning inspectors normally expect infrastructure funding assumptions to be clearly identified and evidenced in a plan, not simply anticipated. When the financial margin of a scheme is already narrow, each additional requirement places more pressure on that balance. Recent discussions with Leicestershire County Council have already highlighted the scale of infrastructure that may be required to support development in this area. And when financial pressures increase on a large development, something usually changes. Affordable housing levels may be reduced, infrastructure contributions may be renegotiated, or delivery may slow down significantly. We have seen examples of this elsewhere in the district, where affordable housing commitments were reduced when viability pressures emerged. This is not unusual in large strategic developments. It is simply how viability negotiations often work in practice. There is also a broader point. A large point of the district housing supply in this local plan depends on a single allocation delivery as expected. If a site of this scale is delayed or renegotiated because of viability pressures, the impact of the district's housing trajectory could be significant. Where housing strategy relies heavily on one strategic allocation, any risk to that site can affect the district's 5-year housing land supply and increase the risk of speculative planning appeals elsewhere in the district. Many small sites spread risk. One very large site concentrates it. Councils are therefore being asked to consider a very important question tonight. Is the financial basis allocation significantly robust to support the infrastructure and housing commitments expected from them? Or does the current evidence suggest the margins are already too tight to rely on the confidence? This is not a political question. It is a practical one about deliverability. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Very good timing. Okay, so I now call upon Mrs. Nicola, and forgive me if I get this wrong, Mrs. Nicola
Meskimen. Yeah,
Meskimen.
Is that okay?
Nicola,
Can you hear
have 3 minutes.
Okie dokie. Chair, councillors, I would like to speak about the historic landscape surrounding the proposed strategic development area. This is not just simply open farmland. It's a landscape shaped by more than 2,000 years of history. Gartree Road itself follows the line of the Roman road known as the Via Davana, one of the historic routes linking Leicester to the wider Roman road network. The name Stretton comes from the Old English, meaning a settlement beside a Roman road. Within the proposed development area lies the site of Stretton Magna, a deserted medieval village that's now a scheduled monument containing the earthworks of the former settlement, a moated manorial site and fish ponds. That monument sits within the proposed allocation itself, not simply nearby. The historic Church of St Giles is also part of the same medieval landscape, and Great Glen is a long-established village whose origins go back many centuries, and together these features form an historic landscape that has evolved gradually over time. There is an important legal and policy principle here. Under the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act, decision makers must give special regard to the preservation of listed buildings and their setting. National planning policy reinforces this by requiring great weight to be given to conserving heritage assets and recognising that their significance derives not only from the monument itself, but from the landscape around it in which it is experienced. You may hear that master plans can provide green buffers around heritage features, but the issue tonight is not whether individual monuments can be fenced off. The issue is whether surrounding a medieval landscape and a scheduled monument with several thousand homes fundamentally alters the setting that gives those assets their meaning. Once development of this scale surrounds an historic landscape, the setting that has existed for centuries cannot realistically be recreated, and these issues cannot be deferred entirely to later planning applications. National policy expects that local plans themselves understand the significance of heritage assets and the impact development may have upon them. Councillors therefore face an important judgment tonight. Whether allocating development of this scale in such an historically sensitive landscape properly protects the heritage setting of this part of the district, and because decisions about historic landscapes are effectively permanent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Getria. Mr. Steve Getria. 3 minutes, please, Steve.
Thank you. Chair, councillors, I would like to focus on the responsibility attached to the decision you are making tonight, you have been asked to make tonight. Residents understand that preparing a local plan is complex and a demanding process. There are hundreds of documents, years of work, difficult choices about how the district should grow, and matching national objectives with community needs. But the decision before you tonight is not simply about process. It is about judgment and responsibility. Councilors are elected to represent the interests of the communities of Harborough District. And in this case, residents rely on you to decide whether the plan being presented is genuinely ready to move forward. Over recent weeks, several arguments have been put forward as reasons why the plan should be submitted now. It supports national housing objectives. Delaying a submission could create planning uncertainty. The council has already spent more than £3 million. Remaining issues can simply be resolved later. You may also hear that submitting now allows the plan to proceed under the transitional arrangements of the current planning framework. But the version of the framework applied does not change the fundamental test. A local plan must be sound. It must still be positively prepared, justified, effective, and consistent with national policy and local needs. Members can't simply assume that the inspector will resolve unresolved strategic issues. Submission represents the council's judgment that the strategy is capable of passing examination. Submitting the plan means declaring that it is ready to be defended. Spending money on a plan does not make it the right plan. And passing unresolved questions for an inspector is not a substitute for making the right decision here tonight. Councilors are not being asked to vote on whether or not Harborough should grow. Growth will happen. You are being asked to decide whether this particular plan and its current strategy, evidence, and unresolved questions is really ready to move forward. Councils across the country sometimes decide that further work is needed, but where additional work is undertaken, it should resolve the underlying evidence and deliverability questions rather than simply return the same strategy for approval at a later date. There is nothing unusual or wrong about strengthening a plan before asking an inspector to examine it. When necessary, councils have taken additional time to strengthen the local plans before submission precisely to reduce the risk of delay, major modification, or failure.
30 seconds.
The judgment belongs to you, not to officers, not to developers, and not to the planning inspector, to you. So I simply ask that you consider your vote very carefully and ask yourselves one question above all else. Does this plan, as it stands today, genuinely serve the long-term interests of the communities that you represent? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to invite the penultimate speaker, Dr. Henry Winham. 3 minutes. Henry, please. Thank you.
Chair, councillors, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. You will likely hear legal advice tonight that the question before you is not whether the local plan is perfect or even if it is fully sound. The advice will likely be that the only question is whether the plan is capable of being found sound by the planning inspector. That is correct as far as it goes. But the legal consequence of that principle is often misunderstood. Members are not free to submit any plan simply because examination exists. Under public law, the Council must have a rational evidential basis for concluding the plan is capable of passing the soundness test of the NPPF. If key elements of the strategy remain unresolved or speculative, submitting the plan can lack a rational evidential basis. Several of those issues have been raised during this process. The County Council, acting as a highway authority, has raised serious concerns about infrastructure delivery. Transport mitigation and funding mechanism remain under discussion. Viability evidence describes the main strategic site as marginal, and a very large proportion of the district's housing trajectory depends on a single allocation delivering as expected. Those are not minor technical details. They go directly to the NPPF test of effectiveness. It is also sometimes suggested that any weaknesses can simply be corrected and through main modifications during examination. But main modifications cannot be used to redesign the spatial strategy of a plan. Inspectors cannot rewrite the core strategy or substitute an entirely different approach to growth. If the underlying strategy itself is flawed, the usual outcome is not modification but withdrawal. Finally, you may hear that submitting the plan will strengthen the Council's position against speculative development, because the plan will become a material consideration. That protection is often overstated. The weight given to an emerging plan depends on how advanced it is and how many unresolved objections remain. Where major soundness issues are still disputed, at appeal, inspectors frequently give emerging plan only limited weight. Submission alone does not create protection. A credible plan does. So the real legal question before you tonight is not whether objections exist. It is whether the Council can rationally conclude that the plan, as currently structured, is capable of passing the test of soundness. If that conclusion cannot be reached with confidence, the prudent course is to resolve the weaknesses first, then submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Winner. Thank you very much. Thank you. And, okay, we have our final speaker now, Mr. Graham Spenlow-Mason, please. If Mr. Spenlow-Mason would go to the lectern. Thank you very much. We have 3 minutes, please.
Chairman, councillors, I speak tonight not only as a resident but as someone who previously chaired this council. Over the years, I have seen how difficult local plan decisions can be. I have also seen the consequences when strategic assumptions turn out to be wrong. Harborough has already experienced the risks of relying heavily on large strategic development areas. Major allocations in previous plans did not deliver housing at the pace expected. Infrastructure proved difficult to secure and delivery was slower than planned. When that happens, the consequences do not stay confined to the site itself. Not once but twice over recent years, with Scraptoff North, which delivered no houses, and Lutterworth East, which is materially behind schedule. They affect the district's housing supply, planning appeals, and the council's ability to control development. That experience should form the decision you make tonight, because the strategy before you again concentrates on very large share of the district's housing delivery in a single strategic location, which is already judged as of marginal viability. If that site encounters delays, infrastructure challenges, or viability renegotiations, the consequences again affect the whole district. That is why the decision tonight is not simply procedural, it is a judgment about risk. You may hear that if the plan is not submitted tonight, the district faces uncertainty. But uncertainty already exists. The infrastructure discussions continue. Transport mitigation remains under development. And many residents across the district have expressed concern. In fact, more than 2,000 Regulation 19 representations from around the district, and not just around LSGR, were submitted regarding this strategic site and the wider plan.
30 seconds.
What is not simply a petition, as seemed to have been represented in the documents submitted to the councillors. It represents a very substantial body of public engagement across Harborough and adjoining communities. Councillors are not required to submit a plan simply because the time has been spent preparing it. Your responsibility is to decide whether the strategy now before you is sufficiently robust to move forward. Once a strategic allocation is embedded in a local plan, reversing that decision later becomes extremely difficult. That is why a local plan must be right before they are submitted.
Please, Mr. Spenlow-Mason, 3 minutes.
Not afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. Okay, thank you very much. And I'd just like to thank everyone who's spoken tonight. It's been very, very helpful to us, I'm sure. And thank you for coming along and thank you for speaking. And I'll now call upon Councillor Galton, who will present the report.
Chairman, members of the public, we have a momentous decision in front of us this evening. There is no easy option. Not submitting the plan or deferring a decision will have consequences. The issue isn't going to go away. The plan has to be consistent with national policy. That means it must comply with the housing requirements in the mandatory standard method. We all know the pressure the government is putting us under to deliver more houses. The figure in the plan is 13,182, but if you take off commitments and completions and windfalls, we have to find land and deliver 6,422 houses over the planned period. The plan proposes 1,200 houses land south of Gartree Road during the planned period, 1,350 houses north of Market Harborough, 1,200 houses at Scraptoff and Thurnby, 1,500 houses in large villages of Broughton Astley, the Kibworths, Great Glen and Fleckney, 320 houses at Lutterworth. But to add, there is also an assumption that Lutterworth East will deliver 1,500 houses, 150 a year from 2031. Finally, 452 houses in medium villages and 350 houses in small villages. So whilst land south of Gartree Road has received the most objections, and we see that very clearly tonight, and the most attention, and that is entirely right that it's done so because it is a significant proposal, the above clearly shows that in order to meet the government's housing targets, the plan must allocate sites across the whole district, in particular at Market Harborough, Lutterworth and Scraptoff, where significant development is proposed. However, the plan is not just about housing. It proposes new schools, including 2 new secondary schools for the first time for 40 years. It proposes 340,000 square metres of strategic distribution and warehousing at Magna Park. It has ambitious policies on green and blue infrastructure, which members have indicated strong support for, and for combating climate change and environmental policies dealing with flooding where development does take place. It proposes new areas of separation and it preserves our green wedges. Putting land south of Gartree Road into context, the total land supply position by settlement, so this includes all the commitments and things with planning permissions that we know about, over the planned period will be Market Harborough, 4,317. Lutterworth, 2,279. Scraptoff and Thurnby, 1,718. Land south of Gartree Road, in this plan, 1,200. Broughton Astley, 738. Fleckney, 742. So this shows the scale of development we have to deliver, and that we have not targeted any particular area, and certainly not around the area around Stretton Hall. The government is making major changes to the planning system and has significantly increased the council's housing numbers to 735 a year. The council can no longer demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing sites as required by the now mandatory housing requirements. And the consequences of this can be seen all over the district in terms of the number of speculative planning applications being submitted by developers. Without an up-to-date local plan, we face a prolonged period of unplanned speculative development. And members that have been here as long as I have, and Councillor King and other members, will remember what that was like last time when we didn't have an up-to-date local plan between about 2012 and when we did get one in 2019. We have a small window of opportunity to submit the draft local plan under the old system. If we do not submit the draft plan to the Planning Inspectorate for public examination, we lose the transitional arrangements the Council has worked so hard to get. By submitting now, we will only have to allocate sites for 534 houses per year, as opposed to the 735 the new system requires the Council to provide. That's 3,555 houses over the planned period. In my experience of preparing local plans over many years, nothing good comes from delay. Having a new local plan in place is the only way to control and manage the mounting pressure from developers to build on greenfield sites all over our district. The best option, therefore, is to allow the planning inspector, he or she, to do their job and examine the plan, deal with any modifications that come forward, and then the plan will come back to members for adoption, if that's what Council wishes to do, and of course to consider all the modifications. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I'm moving tonight that we do submit the plan and we carry on to the next stage, which is public examination, and let those issues proceed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Galton. Thank you for giving us lots of dimensions around what we're trying to do tonight. I think that will be helpful. Now, do I have a seconder for this report, please? Councillor Knowles, you are seconding the report.
Chairman, I second it and reserve my comments, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor Knowles. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, well, we're heading towards having this debate, aren't we? But prior to this, I'd like to introduce two of our external guests who have been sitting here for quite a long time, and we need to introduce them. We have on the top table there, we have Mr. Derek Stebbings of the Intelligent Plans and Examinations. Derek has over 50 years professional planning experience, including local plan production with local authorities, and also the examination of local plans as an inspector with the Planning Inspectorate, and as a member of the government-appointed Local Plan Expert Group. Derek has advised local planning authorities and the Planning Advisory Service on the local plan process, procedures and good practice, and alongside provision of training to local planning authorities. And Derek is here to help us on our way in the debate as well if we need further advice. And also to introduce Mr. Simon Bird, King's Counsel, here on the table by me. And Simon is a well-known, renowned KC who specialises in planning, environment, compulsory purchase and compensation, and major infrastructure projects. Simon has advised the Council on planning-related topics for a number of years, is well known to us, and is well versed in the local planning issues, so that we know everyone here around us for tonight. Now, I'm going to, at this stage in the proceedings, I'm going to use my discretion under 4.1.18 of the Constitution to allow the Director of Planning to deliver a short presentation to add more information to us before we start the debate. So I call upon Mr. David Axton, Director of Planning, to deliver his presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. Wait for the machine to catch up with my moving on with the slide there. So I'll get through the slide presentation as quickly as I can and allow the other people to speak and for the debate to take place.
Thank you, David.
The presentation I'm going to run through tonight just goes through these topics. Progress since Council met on the 3rd of March 2025, and I was almost standing in the exact same place talking to Council then. What we're here to consider this evening, the key messages and reasons to submit the local plan, and the plan is, I can tell Council, ready to be examined and is capable of being found sound. Consequences of not submitting the local plan, and that just a quick run through of the local plan inspection process, and then conclusion, closing and final thoughts. So progress since Council met on the 3rd of March. Council will be aware, we published the proposed submission local plan for consultation 10th of March, and that was consulted until the 6th of May. That crucially met what people refer often this evening as the transitional arrangements. Deadline to meet those was the 12th of March, and we met them by 2 days. December 2023 MPPF means that we can deliver 2,000 to 2,500 fewer new homes in the plan. It's a discount from the government, if you like, for meeting those transitional arrangements. We can go under the former Conservative government MPPF from December 2023 rather than the current government's MPPF of December 2024. The Regulation 19 consultation, as it's colloquially referred to, and engagement was successfully completed. Very successfully completed. We had 1,902 individual responses from 507 sources or representors, and a petition with 2,370 signatures. And I stress to people, it's important to people in the public gallery, that all of those individual representations will be forwarded to the inspector for their consideration. So the officers have analysed those responses to establish the key matters raised, of which I'll raise more later, and nothing is raised to consider to cause soundness issues which cannot be resolved during the examination process. As such, the plan is considered by your officers, myself and my team, to be considered to be sound or capable of being found sound by an inspector, and therefore members can confidently approve the submission of the local plan today. Extensive work has been undertaken with partner organisations, matters that they raise, for example Leicestershire County Council, the City Council, National Highways and Warwickshire County Council. I just wanted to briefly turn attention to Leicestershire County Council. As said in paragraph 313 of the covering report before you tonight, further transport evidence has been completed. This models the transport implications of the plan and identifies strategic mitigation measures set out. The community infrastructure levy is also mentioned here as a mechanism to gather developer funding for strategic infrastructure, and I'll mention a bit more on the community infrastructure levy a bit later on. So as Director of Planning, I can tell and advise Council this evening that I expect a statement of common ground to be agreed with the County Council on relatively modest modifications to suggest to the Inspector that will address the concerns of the County Council in their report on the proposed submission local plan to their Cabinet on the 18th of March 2025, not 2026, I apologise. Positive outcomes across the piece, therefore, with robust positions to take into the public examination led by the Planning Inspectorate later in the year should we submit tonight. Statements of common ground are being developed not just with the County Council but with other key partners and stakeholders, which will be a strong position to take into the examination, and the examination process will be a thorough consideration by the Inspector of all representations and issues raised. We are proposing some key modifications to go with that bundle to go to the Inspector, and if we submit, they will be sent off with that submission bundle. But it will be the Inspector that will decide whether they go forward, not the Council. They'll be for their consideration. Advanced discussions are going on proposed allocated sites to achieve the best possible urban design and place-making outputs. Many of the proposed sites are already subject to advanced planning delivery discussions indeed. Some are already considered by the Planning Committee and some are already granted planning permission. Both positive indications from the development industry that the plan is readily deliverable, achievable and effective, as has been referred to earlier. Productive discussions are also ongoing progressing the community infrastructure levy and seeking funding support from Homes England to enable plan delivery. So what we're here to consider this evening, the plan is now ready to be submitted for rigorous independent public examination. It's important the Council take this step to enable the independent inspector to do their work and test the local plan. The Council and the Examination Programme Officer will guide those who wish to participate. An examination website will be created and managed. With the intention of assisting Council this evening, I'll just now briefly turn to some key messages that it might be useful for Councillors to bear in mind. Under the MPPF transitional arrangements, we are planning for approximately 2,000 to 2,500 fewer homes than if we delay. The Government has now increased national home building targets quite significantly. If we delay submission of the local plan, we risk losing this reduction, and I'm afraid that would be never to come back. So not proposing the local plan would mean a need to start again under the December 2024 MPPF, meaning an increase of at least 3,500 to 4,000 homes. We've heard the figure 3,555. Although future events associated with partner councils, plan-making activities, could mean the number goes significantly higher. Also, delivery contingencies and buffers are required by an inspector, and that could well push those figures higher too. If we don't progress the plan this evening, we potentially face a prolonged period of speculative development. It's a phrase that's often used. It's probably the best phrase to describe it. Potentially up to 2030, 31 or longer due to local government review, with no local control of where development goes. Just as an idea, and this is an extreme idea, it's not suggesting for 1 minute that this number of new homes will come forward, but sites have been submitted to the Council in its Strategic Housing and Employment Land Availability Assessment of over 56,000 new homes. A theoretical potential we're dealing with when we're talking about speculative development. Also, circumstances can change quickly. We could lose the opportunity to submit the plan. This could mean we would need to stop and do costly further work, meaning speculative development perpetuates longer. We may have to extend the plan period, as has been said also, and that would bring more dwellings with it if we need to extend that plan period beyond 2041. Key point, I think, that not submitting the local plan will not stop the delivery of the allocated sites within the plan. Supporting and then adopting the plan, though, will restore a minimum of a 5-year housing and land supply and will stop further speculative development upon adoption. So not tonight, we're not adopting the plan tonight, we're considering submission. But when we come back later, in probably a year or 15 months, when we adopt, if the Council chooses to adopt, it will then stop speculative development at that point. It would also, not just housing, we talk about housing, but it also stop speculative development at other forms of development as well. Employment, B8 warehousing, gypsy and traveller sites, travelling show people and self-build, for example, would also have their speculations removed. Development delivered outside the scope of the local plan is also outside the scope of the infrastructure delivery plan. It's harder to ensure supporting infrastructure can be delivered in a timely and adequate way if it's delivered in a suboptimal and unsustainable way outside the local plan. So the only way to ensure development is supported by adequate infrastructure, in my view, is to ensure the plan-led growth coming from an adopted local plan. There's no alternative. It's important to understand large strategic sites will take 20 to 30 years to build out. Councillor Galton's alluded to it. Only 1,200 homes, I've mentioned that, and there's a lot of people in the gallery from land south of Gartree Road. Only 1,200 are programmed to be delivered before 2041. And adopting the local plan is only the first step. There are multiple stages for development to progress through, including planning application stages. We've also listened to the consultation process and we've suggested some main modifications to the inspector to strengthen the policy requirement to maintain the physical separation between the village of Ullersthorpe and the expanded Magna Park to protect village character, to strengthen the role of distinctive local character plays in the delivery of new development around character appraisals to make sure we get the best possible places we can, and to strengthen the policy to ensure all development, including brownfield, reduces surface water runoff by 20% compared to natural conditions and doesn't increase flood risk. Key messages are, just to conclude, we have a positive and proactive and productive partnerships and relationships with statutory partners. Leicestershire County Council as lead local flood authority, local transport authority and local education authority. The city councils, our district and borough council partners, National Highways, Health Service, Historic England, Natural England and the Environment Agency. Planning applications and pre-application discussions are progressing apace, which demonstrates the plan is viable, achievable, deliverable and effective. The viability of the local plan has been independently assessed and verified by specialist consultants. The land south of Gartree Road sites shows as marginally viable. This means in this locality it is viable. It's 100 miles north of London and this is a strong, positive and encouraging position. Sites at this distance from London, if they're marginally viable, are viable. A master developer like Urban and Civic and Homes England would not be at this stage of master planning if their site was not viable. So the housing delivery trajectory for new homes is realistic, achievable and deliverable, a key test of soundness. By submitting the plan tonight, the Council will incrementally increase the weight that can be attributed to the plan. Understand the point about objections, that's factored in by an inspector, but it would increase the weight that can be attributed to the plan. Work with statutory consultees, like the County Council and National Highways, is moving apace, where those agencies can be supportive of the local plan at public examination. The plan will deliver our housing needs and a 40% expectation of affordable housing. It will deliver new public green and open space. It will support infrastructure through the IDP, developer contributions and the community infrastructure levy. We're also working with Homes England to provide a significant infrastructure funding support through the National New Homes Accelerator programme, where individual and specific funding could be brought into the district to support the delivery of the plan. We've already talked about two new secondary schools. It is quite amazing to be saying we can deliver 2 new secondary schools. They're very rare to deliver that amount of new schooling in a district. As Councillor Dalton's already mentioned, it hasn't happened for over 40 years. New job and employment opportunities and protecting those historic settlements. Briefly on the consequences of not submitting, independent advisers indicate Harbour is currently one of the most fortunate councils in the country in terms of having its planning destiny in its own hands. This could change rapidly if council do not resolve to submit the plan today. We lose the 2,500 fewer homes. Under those transitional arrangements, under the 2023 NPPF, they would be lost. Housing need would increase by at least 3,500 to 4,000, and future events could push that higher, with the delivery buffer on top of that higher still. Unplanned, suboptimal and speculative development would continue unchecked and unabated for potentially a significant number of years to come. We've seen examples of how damaging unplanned development across the district can be. The last time we didn't have a 5-year land supply, Oaks Road, Great Glen and Coventry Road, Lutterworth. Both sites the council would probably not have chosen to come forward, but could do nothing to stop them. That scenario could be in place for perhaps 4 to 5 years, with all considered, so we might not be back in this position until 2030-31. Other former district and borough councils may not have an up-to-date local plan that we merge into in a new unitary authority, and they will bring their own potential lack of a 5-year land supply into the former Harbour District area, further exacerbating that situation. Financial and human resource investments have been made, some £3 million, but that would be lost. The Secretary of State's given themselves enhanced powers over plan making. They could take the council into special plan making measures, and a team from the government could prepare a plan for the district, or the Secretary of State could direct the council to submit the local plan as it's been found capable of being found sound. By submitting a local plan today, the district can put in place an enhanced developer contributions mechanism, the community infrastructure levy, to be prepared in parallel with the plan. Particular types of infrastructure could be placed on an upfront tariff, for example education and highways and transport, and developers would then know exactly what they were due to pay for those infrastructures. Without the plan that will be harder, with no strategic spatial strategy and no accompanying infrastructure delivery plan. The planning inspection process, so if the council agreed to submit the plan this evening, the plan and all its supporting documents will be submitted to the planning inspectorate, and the planning inspectorate would make preparations for the examination. The planning inspectorate would appoint an inspector, and the council would appoint a programme officer, a sort of examination secretary, responsible for the efficient running of the examination. The inspector will read and analyse all the representations submitted in whatever form they've been submitted, directly or via a petition or in any form at all, during that public consultation period. And they will derive what's called their matters, issues and questions, sometimes referred to as MIQs.
Chairman, can I just intervene? How long is this, using your discretion, going to go on for? It's 15 minutes, Chairman.
I think...
Come on, the public got 3 minutes. We get 5. You've just allowed the director to waffle on for... Sorry, no disrespect, David. Well, 15 minutes, and he hasn't finished.
Councillor King, I get your comment. I don't think it's right to call it waffling. There's a lot of detailed information.
Well, Chairman, with respect, we've heard it all before, King, so
and
I have anyway.
Councillor King, I think we are quite close to the
very close
end of the formal presentation.
Very close indeed. With your indulgence, I'll stop now.
Please continue, David. Well, I'm sure we're very close to the end.
So the MIQs will form the basis of the public examination hearings on a topic and site base, and the inspector will prepare a draft programme. The hearings will then be held in this chamber on dates to be confirmed. Following the formal closure of the hearings, proposed modifications that the inspector deemed necessary will be publicly consulted upon for 6 weeks and sent to the inspector. The inspector will decide if further examination hearings sessions are required as a result of what they say. The inspector will then draft their report, send it to the council. That will be finalised and sent back to us following fact check for the council to consider in this chamber as to whether to adopt the plan with the main modifications. The plan is recommended to be modified by the inspector will then come back to Cabinet and to Council, and at that point a decision will be made on to whether to adopt the plan in its final modified form. I stress the adoption of the plan is a further member decision, not one tonight, but one possibly in a year or so's time. Members will be asked to make a further decision at that point.
Thank you, David. I mean, this is such an incredibly important decision, isn't it, for all of us? And I think what the Director has told us has got to be helpful to all the councillors here. We introduced Derek earlier, and I would like, because it's so important we get all the views here, and the knowledge of experience. So I would like Mr. Derek Stebbings to say a few words.
Sorry, Chair. Chair,
as a completely independent
point of order, Chair. I would have thought it would have been the right thing to happen for you to come to me and all the group leaders in this chamber to agree this process, but instead we have to sit here and listen to some very lengthy speeches we have already heard before. No offence, David, but we've already heard them before.
Continue if you, sorry.
17 minutes that last speech lasted for.
Point of order to Chairman.
The residents had 3 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Wellban. We've had half an hour also. We're giving everyone the opportunity.
Point of order, Chairman.
We do give the officers the opportunity. So I'm going to ask Mr. Derek.
Point of order, Chairman. It must be heard, Chairman.
What point of order is that, Councillor?
The point of order, Chairman, is you've referenced part of the Constitution. I would be really grateful if you could read it out, because you only referenced David Atkinson. You didn't reference a second speaker. I would be grateful if, for reasons of transparency, for all councillors to have that read out so we understand what's actually happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a comment there?
So the relevant part of the Constitution is that the business to be conducted at an extraordinary meeting shall be restricted to the item of business contained in the request for the extraordinary meeting. There should be no consideration of previous minutes or reports from committees, except the chairman may at their absolute discretion permit other items of business to be conducted for the efficient discharge of the council's business. So that essentially gives the chairman quite a lot of discretion to allow other items such as officers speaking to be included.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, point of order, Chairman. I didn't hear anything about extra speeches, anything to do with extra speakers, Chairman. I'm very uncomfortable about what's going on.
All right. Well, we're spending a lot of time, aren't we? All of the information that's being presented tonight, I think, is beneficial for everybody. Yeah. So I am using my discretion, and I'm going to invite Mr. Derek Stebbings to just give us an independent view on where we are with the local plan.
If I may. Just what you just read out there, Chair, said items of business. Yeah. Having a person speaking is not an item of business. That is an additional speaker. In my understanding, plain speaking, that is an item. That is not an item of business. And you're adding yet more speakers. How many more speakers are you going to add, Chair? We've already been here an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes. We're all being denied our opportunity to contribute. I tell you, Chair, you're out of order, Chair. Thank you.
Well, I disagree. They're not speeches, these are presentations of facts, which I think everyone needs to have. and therefore I'm going to call on Mr Derek Stebbins as a completely independent view. I'll be very tolerant and I'll let Councillor Peter Scott speak. Or you've got your hand up, Peter, so please speak.
Chair, you spoke very eloquently at the start of this evening about debate. We haven't heard a debate, we've heard a diatribe.
The debate is coming.
Please let
Councillor
the debate start.
We will be there very soon, Councillor Scott. I hear what you say. Derek, would you like to just give us a short presentation?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and it will be short.
Independent view, and then we'll start the debate.
And should last no more than 3 minutes if members are prepared to hear me speak. I am talking to you tonight.
Please go ahead. We've listened to everyone. Please go ahead, Derek.
As a wholly independent advisor, and I speak to you as a former local plan inspector as well, and as you heard earlier, with 50 years' experience of writing plans, advising government, examining plans, and now advising authorities, including yourselves, Chairman. You are in a position tonight that virtually every other local planning authority in England today can only dream of. You can submit your plan under the transitional arrangements contained in the NPPF, which you've heard about, paragraph 234, if you want to explore those, that I am only aware of that 2 authorities, including Harborough, can take advantage of. And that is how unique your position and how good your position is tonight, if you decide to submit this plan for examination. I reviewed about a month ago all of the documents that are before you tonight. That's appendices A to I inclusive. I did not identify any major soundness issues with the draft plan or its accompanying documents, and I speak to you on that point as a former inspector. You are in a position, as I say, that you should take advantage of, in my professional opinion. And in my professional opinion, it would be irrational for this council not to submit the plan for examination. I consider it to be ready for examination. Yes, it's controversial, you've heard that. Members of the public and other groups, if they have made representations to you at the Regulation 19 stage, those representations will go to the inspector for his or her consideration. You will have an opportunity to make those points orally at a local plan examination. I'm speaking there to the people that are concerned about the plan, Chairman. So, finally, my strongest professional advice to you is to take advantage of the position you find yourselves in tonight and proceed to submit that plan for examination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Stebbins. I appreciate that. And it didn't take long, but it's very important for all of us to understand exactly where we are. So we're now in a position where we can start the debate. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We can start the debate now. And I think I know what the answer. Does any councillor wish to comment on the report? I'm sure they do. I think Councillor Peter Scott was first there.
Yeah, and then I've got Dan and Gare.
And Councillor Dan and
Gare.
Councillor Gare. Councillor Peter Scott from Great Glen.
Right. Good evening, and thank you to Chair, members of the public, Councillor Galton, David Atkinson, Derek Stebbins, et al. I've listened carefully to the lengthy diatribe so far this evening, debate, and I have also spent time reading through the hundreds of pages that make up the local plan. I recognise the significant amount of work that's gone on in producing it, and I thank everyone for doing that. However, after reviewing the documents and listening to the discussion tonight, I still have some fundamental concerns about the viability and soundness of the plan. In particular, I want to highlight the proposals relating to the LSGR, or as I prefer to call it, beautiful countryside of Great Glen. During the consultation process, many residents raised serious concerns that I do not believe have been fully addressed. These include the pressure that such a large development would place on already congested roads, such as the A6 and Gartree Road, both of which already struggle with traffic at peak times. There are also concerns about the lack of infrastructure to support a development of this scale, including schools, healthcare and transport links. Residents have also raised fears about flooding and surface water runoff and the potential impact on nearby communities if large areas of countryside are developed. Beyond these practical issues, many people simply feel that the proposal would mean the loss of valuable countryside and farmland that forms an important part of the character and identity of Great Glen. I would also say that the sense of undue haste surrounding parts of this process, and at times the tone of scaremongering about what might happen if decisions are not rushed through, has not helped build confidence in the plan. I'm moving on to the risks, I believe, that are involved with the plan. I'm concerned that there are possible future challenges, and our KC present tonight will be aware of previous plans that were challenged in Leeds and Mendip. There are three reasons sometimes that these things are challenged: reasonable alternatives and site selection. Now, the public argue that concentrating a massive share of housing, that's approximately 4,000 homes, which differs from what Councillor Gorton has said, in a single strategic development area between Oadby and Great Glen is a repeat of past failed strategies. Now, grounds for challenge for that may be that if the council has not legally justified why this specific new town that's specified was mentioned was chosen over other sustainable distributions across the district, it may face the same site selection logic, which were the errors that caused the Leeds one to fail. Inadequate evidence and infrastructure, this caused the Leeds as well, in the Leeds case. Serious concerns regarding the plan's impact on the A6 corridor, education and health provision. Now, the grounds for challenge on this would be that we are being asked to vote blind on vague assurances that these gaps will be filled later. I think it was called holes in the hull that still exist. Adopting a plan with unresolved holes in the hull regarding infrastructure viability could lead to a finding of legal unsoundness. And then third, policy misrepresentation. Unmet housing need. This caused the Mendip one to fail. Leicester's unmet need. Now that's our plan. It will be our plan if it goes through, includes a controversial decision to take on a portion of Leicester's unmet housing need. The grounds for challenge on that could well be the legal interpretation of the duty to cooperate, or the specific mathematical allocation of these homes if that's found to be flawed or based on outdated data, and the entire spatial strategy could be remitted or quashed. Again, I don't know if Simon Bird is going to speak to us tonight at all, but I'd like to ask, in terms of legal sensitivity, opponents argue that the traffic impact on rural roads in the A6 hasn't been fully mitigated in the current evidence base, and so similar to the errors of fact that successfully challenged the Leeds site allocation plan could happen with ours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peter Scott, and I'm sure we've got the notes on that, so thank you, Councillor Scott. And I think the next one is Councillor Paul Dan, please.
Thanks, Chairman. For members of the public, I'm Councillor Dan and I support a ward in Broughton Astley. Thank you. I'm amazed that we would consider passing a local plan to an inspector for examination that is incomplete and therefore not fit for purpose. It was said by many of us at the outset that despite a large amount of resource being spent on planners and consultants, the deadline dates for production were unrealistic. This has led to some parts of the democratic system of scrutiny being rushed. I offer the following illustrations. In July of 2024, we were first offered the opportunity to view the sites that were under review. For my part, I was horrified that Frolsworth Road in Broughton Astley, in one of my areas, was prone to flooding and would have a huge traffic issue. On the 11th of February 2025, one day before release of the plan, we were called to a briefing which set out the chosen sites. There was no debate, and we were told that it would not be possible to make any meaningful alterations without a large rewrite of the plan, causing future deadlines to be missed. In effect, this was a done deal, a fait accompli. Needless to say, that plan has now anything from 475 to 700 dwellings on Frolsworth Road. This has led to residents feeling that their input has not been listened to, because Broughton Astley held 3 public meetings listing other sites imminently better and more preferable to Falsworth Road. I'm at a loss to explain why this is still on the table. And I have to say, we as a prominent Leicestershire District Council should have taken more time to debate the site specifics. It does not feel to me like we are a councillor-led organisation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dan. And now I'll call on Councillor David Gare. Can't quite see him behind the pillow, but yeah, you're there. Councillor David Gare, please, from Lutterworth.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor David Gare, I represent Lutterworth East, which is sandwiched obviously between a potential 3,000 houses and Magna Park, the largest logistics unit in Europe, which has made this council one of the wealthiest councils in the country, I think the top 10 district councils. So when first elected to the district council in spring of '83, we had a problem which has some parallels to the one we're facing now, and that was the duty to cooperate, the statement of common ground with the city, and if we fail to do that, then their development would become free range. At the time, I had a phone call from the editor of a national house builders magazine who wanted to know what the people of Lutterworth thought about the duty to cooperate with Leicester City. And I also worked with somebody who for 40 years had been a private planning consultant, and he filled me in on some of their more racy practices. Both of them said at the end of an extended conversation that if you don't get this sorted out, it will be open season. And that was said with some sympathy. And they said, did I know what that meant? And I said, yes, I do, because between us and Magna Park, there was an area of separation consisting of the country park, lots of fields, and some rewilding areas. A planning application was placed in for the southern end of that, some 400 houses covering a spectacular view as you come down into the town, and there was a public right-of-way across that, which was an old farm track, previously cobbled, very pleasant to walk down and up the hill to the old Blake and Hall farm. That is now gone. It's completely covered in houses. The public right-of-way is now a very narrow tarmac path around the edge, and that is this open season speculative development referred to by David Atkinson. There are other examples. If you come out of Great Glen, going up the hill towards Burton Overy, on the back road there is a estate at the top of that hill, which was a result of no real restrictions on what went on there. Now that is at the top of the hill. There are no services there. It's a housing estate, and the runoff down there will run down and make problems in Great Glen. And there is an inviting space between there. Now, the other evening, on February the 10th, we sat here in planning, and there was an application to fill in the space between Smeaton Westerby, one of the most, what should we say, attractive villages in Leicestershire, and the edge of Kibworth Beesham. Councillor Hollick spoke very eloquently about Smeaton Westerby, and it is truly a beautiful village. Councillor Wellband spoke against the development of housing there, and I supported both of them, and we were able to reject that application on the grounds that there was a plan in place. Obviously they can appeal, but if it comes back, it will still, if we adopt this plan, face the problem that it is not in the local plan. If we vote not to adopt the plan, then they will just go through as it did at Kingsbury Park on the edge of Lutterworth, or Glen Oaks at the top of the field in Great Glen. So if you vote, and now it is speculation, but if you vote not to adopt this plan, I can guarantee almost that that gap will fill. Very, very fine gap between two developments. Okay. We need housing. There is no question about that, but we do need it to be developed with a plan. I have a long experience of planning going back. So I fully support what has been said this evening by David Atkinson and the gentleman to his right, and indeed by the councillor to his left. And if we don't adopt this plan, you will see all over the place examples of speculative building. And so anyway, that's my recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gare. At the moment, we don't have any other speakers. We do have another speaker. Thank you, Councillor King.
Chairman, thank you. I've reviewed all the documents, and I'd also like to thank residents, taxpayers who've turned up to express their views at this meeting and previous meetings before this. So what we know, Chairman and colleagues, is that housing matters. We need homes for families, we need affordable housing, and we need sustainable communities where people can live, work and thrive. But housing policy must also be grounded in realism, infrastructure, and what we've heard a lot about tonight is deliverability. Unfortunately, in my view, that is precisely where this local plan begins to unravel. So tonight we have been asked to approve the recommendations in the report before us and submit this local plan to the Planning Inspectorate for examination. And of course, as we've heard, that is a significant step, because once the plan is submitted, we're effectively telling the Planning Inspector that this strategy is sound, justified and deliverable. So the question, I know residents have mentioned this one to other colleagues, we should all be asking ourselves tonight is very simple. Is it? Harborough no longer has a 5-year housing supply, and the key reasons for that is the failure of major strategic sites that this council previously relied on. Stratford North SDA, that's completely failed. Lutterworth East, and that's been mentioned already, was meant to deliver homes during the planned period now, but it's not projected to deliver until around 2031-32. That's nearly a decade later than what was envisaged only a few years ago. But instead of focusing on delivering that scheme that already has planning permission, we now appear to be heading towards carpeting over yet more green fields, including land owned by government agencies themselves, with thousands of tonnes of concrete and tarmac. So that, to me, is not a credible strategy for housing delivery. We also need to recognise the wider context, and it's been mentioned. The city has a significant unmet housing need. And why does it have that? Because it's got a persistent refusal to build upwards and at high enough densities. So that's given pressure on districts like Harborough, like ours. And but the answer cannot be simply we need to push large-scale development into rural districts without infrastructure to support it. Yet that is exactly what this plan risks doing. But let's look specifically at policy DSA 01. It's a natty title, isn't it? Or Land South of Gartree Road. This is presented as strategic major allocation. In the plan period to 2041, it's only going to deliver around 1,200 homes. But the enormous scale of land being allocated, the number of homes actually delivered during the period is very, very modest. But the local plan didn't require a new settlement larger than Lutterworth to be built in this location. Harborough's own Sheila from 2024 identifies around 100 sites across the district that are either deliverable or developable. This means the local plan did not need to rely on a single massive development south of Gartree Road. To deliver 4,000 homes for this site, you would only need around 20 to 30 medium-sized sites across the district. So, of course, you need a lot fewer for just 1,200. And that's exactly the type of balanced and distributed growth that most local plans pursue. Instead, this administration has chosen to gamble everything on one enormous development. And as we've said before, this is a very high-risk strategy. For many residents and for some of us councillors, there's also a strong sense of déjà vu about this proposal, because we've been here before. Back in 2008, this council responded to the government on the proposed Penbury Eco-Town in this very same corridor. The council then raised serious concerns about traffic congestion on the A6 and A47, lack of infrastructure to support development on this scale, loss of countryside and farmland, and concerns that such a development would simply become a suburb of Leicester rather than a self-sustaining community. Anyone remember the tram to nowhere? This council rightly concluded then that Penbury was the wrong development in the wrong place, and these concerns were not theoretical then, and they're not theoretical now. Because when residents look at what is being proposed south of Gartree Road today, many recognise something very familiar: the same location, the same scale of development, the same unresolved infrastructure questions. And that is why many residents will understandably see this for what it is, Penbury 2.0. Chairman, the fundamental questions have not changed: transport, infrastructure, deliverability, and the impact on our rural communities. If anything, those questions are even more serious today, given the serious congestion pressures already experienced on the A6 corridor. Anyone who travels through Glen, Kibworths or the surrounding villages at peak times knows exactly what that looks like in reality. Queues, delays, pollution, both air and noise, rat running through villages, and increasing pressure on rural roads that were never designed to carry that level of traffic. Yet the infrastructure needed to deal with that pressure is still not clearly identified, funded or programmed. Planning for thousands of homes without solving the A6 corridor is not strategic planning. It's simply pushing the problem down the road, so-called kicking the can. Housing numbers alone do not create successful communities.
5 minutes, Councillor.
Homes must be delivered alongside roads, schools, health services, public transport and jobs. Without that infrastructure, development simply becomes unsustainable urban sprawl around Leicester, a ring of concrete and tarmac around our villages. Chairman, if Penbury was the wrong development in the wrong place in 2008, we should think very carefully before sending Penbury 2.0 to the planning inspector today. And for those reasons and many others which I haven't got time to go into, I cannot support submitting this plan in its current form. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Thank you very much. I was very generous with the timing for you. I hope you're satisfied with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And we have certainly at least 2 more speakers. I'm going to call on Councillor Martin Sarfas from Lutterworth, please.
In today's age, we need to build houses. Under planning regulations for infrastructure, that's previous governments' planning laws, and those things are the problems with the infrastructure problems. And we can only look at previous leadership of the Conservative leadership of Harbour District Council on not providing infrastructure when building houses, when asked to put a spine road into Lutterworth, made sure that the people on the planning department, on the planning committee, voted against. So when someone tries to give a political speech, and he should look at his own leadership and see that he is a hypocrite in his own not providing infrastructure for building houses.
Councillor Sarfas, can I just say, I want this to be a sensible.
It is being sensible.
I don't want to be accusing individuals of anything.
After listening to that speech, which was like an election speech,
it was a polite speech.
When he claimed,
you would do the same, please.
When he claims, that he wants to make sure there's infrastructure in Harbour District, when his own leadership, there was no infrastructure in building on his plan properly for Lutterworth. And so, if we don't build houses, if we don't go through this plan, then we will build more houses under the Conservative policy. So I will be saying that this needs to go to the planning officer as fulfilled.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I don't want debate to get too personal. There's no need for that. We've got a lot of facts to deal with and comment on them, and not personalities. Thank you, Councillor
Can I
Sarfas.
have a point of information? Not information, but clarification, please. I'd like to speak later, but I'd just like to clarify a couple of things. First of all, being the County Councillor for Lutterworth, and at the time District Councillor, very much involved in the matter, the Spine Road was not provided because we lost Homes of England Infrastructure Fund. There was some money. Infrastructure gets provided by developers, and infrastructure does not get provided by Harborough District Council. Another point of information is that I am, Councillor Gare is the councillor for Lutterworth and a bit of Magna Park, which is focused around George House. I am the County and District Councillor for all of Lutterworth, from Lutterworth right to the end, and all of the proposals, just for clarification.
Yes, thank you very much for the clarification, Councillor Mrs Page. Councillor Graves, I think, is the next person to speak. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Chair. Just
Nassley, thank you.
A few brief points. I recall the last local plan vote. I think it was in the Three Swans Hotel. I think it was 2018. I think 2019. I think Councillor Gare was in the audience before being elected in 2023. And I think you were pretty much against the proposal for the Spine Road back then. I think I recall I was the only councillor to vote against that local plan. I think both sides, both political groups voted for it. And I raised what I thought was a really important point on the Lutterworth East, very large development, 2,750 homes, almost dwarfed by the proposed new town near Stretton Hall, Great Glen, now, which is proposed to be a lot bigger. I received an email, for example, from David Atkinson at the time. Don't know if you recall David Atkinson, where you put in writing it was the most risky option at that time to put all the eggs in one basket. And I recall being really concerned that 1,500 houses had to be occupied before the Spine Road, or some people call it bypass. It's not a bypass. The planning inspector said that before that was constructed. The reason I'm going back into the past is there's no development yet there. Nothing's happened. It was risky. It's very difficult. There have been some major issues raised there. And this council is proposing now a new site, what, 30, 40, 50% bigger? I don't know what the exact maths is. I'm really concerned about the infrastructure. I'm really concerned about the soundness of the plan. And I'd like to finish, please, by asking David Atkinson a question. Very early in your long speech, David, you mentioned paragraph 3.13 about the difficulty that Leicestershire County Council has with transport issues. You said at that point, and in many other subsequent screens, that I mean, it was just very positive sounding. You know, everything pointed towards it was the right thing to do. I'd be very grateful for your response, please. What has been Leicestershire County Council's response? Have they agreed that the mitigations address the issue of soundness, address their concerns? Are they happy and content? Are they sitting back and folding their arms? I'd like to ask for a yes or no answer, but I don't think that will be forthcoming. But you did mention this very early on in your talk. You did say and imply that it was a very positive thing. Has it been resolved? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. I would call upon our planning director. Are you okay to make a comment on that, please, sir? David? Yep. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
With pleasure, Chairman. If
This isn't the Q&A. If there's questions, it should be dealt with in summing up.
You're saying? No?
No, normally, if members want to request something, normally it's dealt with by the portfolio holder and summing up. Obviously, the portfolio holder could say, well, I don't mind if the officers take that question, and then it's down to your judgment. But we don't want this to turn into a Q&A. We're supposed to be doing the debate.
Okay, well, We're concerned about it, yeah, question and answer, but I mean, I will allow this one, but no more. Okay? Please go ahead, David.
Thank you, Chairman. Discussions are very advanced, Councillor Graves. I would expect within the next few weeks to be able to have the conclusion to the debate with the County Council, and for relatively modest modifications to be agreed and a statement of common ground to be agreed. With, hopefully, my intention and my office's intention would be to have that for physical submission, including the bundle with the submission documents. Thank you, Chairman.
You're okay with that, Councillor Graves, yeah? That's the answer. Okay, the next speaker is Councillor Jim Knight, also representing Lutterworth, please. Go ahead, Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, so yeah, I'm Councillor Jim Knight, I'm from Lutterworth West. And like many of us here this evening, I am not an expert on planning. Councillor Bannister, you going to speak, or did you as a point of order?
Councillor Bannister.
I'm just indicating my desire to speak later.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Good. Excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Bannister. You can have your turn later. Councillor Knight.
I am too courteous. And like many of us here, I'm not an expert on planning, and I do therefore rely on the advice and expertise of officers, as I'm sure members opposite had to do at the last local plan. And they would have had to have done that when Lutterworth East was on the cards. I'm sure you would have spoken to officers and you would have taken their advice. I don't believe our officers are in the business of scaremongering. They are, I believe, more professional than that.